Let's run it back on season 6. It's episode 72 of For Our Edification. All right, thank you so much for joining me on For Our Edification. I'm Eddie Francis. For Our Edification is your personal leadership podcast where we have conversations and share thoughts about personal growth and development to build our identities to be of value to the folks around us so they can, I can't help myself, feel the power. For Our Edification is brought to you by Edify Ventures. Show them who you are. Ask me about public speaking coaching from Edify Ventures to amplify your personal brand and your leadership voice today. Email Eddie at eddiefrancis.com to set up a no obligation 30-minute brainstorm call. Past episodes of For Our Edification are available at eddiefrancis.com, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode, like the podcast, and rate it on your favorite platform. Also, talk to me on social media. Substack is home base for Our Edification. You can share thoughts there. Also, you can hang out with me on LinkedIn. There's also Facebook where you can find me at Eddie Francis Unscripted, and you can find me on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Fanbase at Eddie Francis 06. All right, let's take this look back at season 6. The views and opinions expressed on For Our Edification do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the hosts, guests, or any entities with which we are affiliated. Season 6 is where I really tried to shift into another gear with For Our Edification. So I decided toward the end of season 5 that I would get more focused on personal leadership. I wanted to hear stories of people's personal growth and development and how the work that they're doing, not only whatever it is that they do professionally, but the work that they do on themselves is benefiting people around them and what that looks like. And so I kind of ended season 5 on a pretty high note. So season 6, I really wanted to come in smoking, and I was all ready to do my first episode of For Our Edification, season 6. It was episode 56, and Halima just ruined it because she decided that she wanted to interview me. This woman turned the tables on me, this woman. And so it actually wound up being a pretty interesting experience for me. We talked about why I focus on identity and value. We talk about how I even got the name Fast Eddie from my radio days and what I've learned about leadership in the 30 plus years that I've been in the workforce, and also what really gave me that extra boost of wanting to really talk more about leadership and understand leadership more as part of my master's degree program. But then we even got an opportunity to talk about how I weave leadership into my public speaking coaching. And so here's an excerpt from that episode 56, where Halima turned the tables on me.
Your journey into this space, into the personal leadership space, into even the organizational leadership space, because you talk about that a lot as well. How do you translate that to benefit people like nonprofit leaders and education, small business leaders? Share with us some of the ways that you engage with that, and some of the ways that you share of your personal experiences along with the expertise you develop.
For me, my orientation to it was watching a bunch of people, honestly, who did a bad job at it because they wanted the results, but they didn't want to treat people well. You got to put your people first, because if you don't put your people first, if you don't treat your people well, you're not going to get your results. There's just no way that's not going to happen. I realized that if a person who is in a leadership position is having real issues with just keeping themselves together, they can't lead other people. The other thing that I really, really started to pick up about leadership was the importance of listening. And I think some of the best leaders that I've spoken to, they talk about things that they understood and heard from people. the people who I have really admired as leaders, I've also noticed that they have changed the way that they've done things because of what they heard from people. And they weren't afraid to change. So I'm not going to walk you through every single episode of season 6. I'm actually going to point out some episodes that stood out to me. And one thing I decided to do was start a new segment. And that new segment is Higher Edification. Now, there's another segment that I'm going to get into in just a little bit called Right to Bear Arms. But Higher Edification came about because I had been doing a higher ed podcast. It was focused on this practice called employer branding. And it was called I Want to Work There. And I was actually doing it through an education marketing company. Well, at the beginning of 2025, they decided that it was the end of the road for I Want to Work There, funky bastards. But in all seriousness, I am actually thankful. I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to do it. And I'm also very seriously very appreciative. But I did realize that the direction that this company was going in, my podcast didn't fit the direction that they wanted to go in. But I love higher education, as you've probably heard me talk about. And so I wanted to figure out how to weave higher education into for our edification. And so I realized that one of the reasons that I do have such an appreciation for higher education is I have seen what higher education has done for people personally to help them advance their lives and help them develop as people. And so it hit me like a ton of bricks. I have this colleague from Southern New Hampshire University named James K. Winfield. And I decided that Dr. James K. Winfield needed to pay me a visit on For Our Edification, because what James really enjoys doing and what he has dedicated his work in higher ed to doing is creating student success through student access. And so I brought him on to talk about the work that he is doing and what higher education has meant for him personally. I want to come back to your being a first gen student. I was on the opposite end of that. I took college for granted because both of my parents had master's degrees. The next step was for me to go to college. I get in and I just took the entire thing I didn't use resources the way I should have used resources. And so from your end, talk about what it was like to be a first gen and also encountering first gen students in your capacity as a higher education leader.
Honestly, it took some months and it really didn't click until I got into my master's program as well, that I was able to make sense of the challenges that I was experiencing earlier. Like just that intrinsic need to do everything by myself, feeling as if I had something to prove. And also, I mean, I'm firstborn, I'm first gen, all these other things kind of coincide together with my respective identity. And it just helped to make more meaning out of it. So now I see students in my various roles that I've had. I've worked at Auburn, I've worked at University of South Carolina, at Benedict College, and now at Southern New Hampshire, and really normalizing it, the identity, and saying, hey, it's okay if you are first gen. Actually, it's a point of pride, but don't let that pride get in the way of you utilizing resources that are, there for you and readily available for you, because you have a complex thinking that, okay, I can do this all by myself. No one does anything by themselves when it comes to navigating, work. If you have a job, there's a constituency base that's buying or immersing themselves in your product. If you are, working to, engage people in nonprofit or whatever, there has to be some form of a consumer. So there's someone working with you or buying into what you are doing. And with that, that's what I try to frame so that students will know that, oh, wait a minute, I can do this. And if I ask for support, it's not a point of weakness.
That is episode 68 when I brought on Dr. James K. Winfield, who is a student access champion. So I have to tell you, there is kind of a funny story. And I haven't told James this story. So if he's listening to this is going to be news to him. But when I saw his name, I thought to myself, wait a minute, this is not the James Winfield that I know. So I actually have a line brother by the name of James Winfield from Tulane University. And so when I met this other frat brother of mine named James Winfield, I just thought that was the most interesting thing. So it was meant to be. Again, Dr. James K. Winfield, episode 68. Episode 71. Now, I have been wanting Halima to talk for the longest about her research, and I found the opportunity. During the higher edification segment, it occurred to me that part of Halima's research was looking at colleges and universities as civic anchors. And if that's the case, then there is a very personal impact that colleges and universities can have on people in their communities. And it could either be a really good impact or it could be a not so great impact. And of course, Halima came through like a champ. She joined me on episode 71 to talk about colleges and universities as civic anchors. How do you think the presence of an institution impacts individuals in a community?
I think it's deep. Like, I think the personal impact is very deep. I think about as you're asking that question, I think about my own development of relationship and perspective on colleges and universities as a child. Growing up in Winston-Salem State was right there. My brother went to North Carolina A&T. So we went to those parades. We went to the CIAA games. We went to activities at these universities, and we always knew somebody who worked at the school, whether they worked in facilities or whether they were a professor or what. We knew people who interacted or who were a part of the universities. And it played a big role in shaping my perspective on the different types of educational opportunities. And thereby, it produced a certain mindset in me in terms of career opportunity. And what it gave me personally was this appreciation for learning that was really kind of expansive. So there's no limit to what I could learn, and therefore there are very few limits to what I can do and be. I think that's a part of the learning process for your students, when you can figure out how to navigate the complexities of your community and contribute to the community and have a relationship there. I think it impacts just at a very individualized personal level what the aspirations are that people see for themselves in your community, in a specific community. Because if they're always being told, you're welcome here, you're a part of being here, we value you, we value what you bring to the table, then they're going to walk in the room like they're welcome there, like they have something to contribute.
And we can't be what we are without you being here.
Exactly. Without you being here. Like, and a lot of schools, you talk about marketing, a lot of schools, they use location and place as one of their biggest marketing tools. Students that go to NYU, you see the Empire State Building. NYU is not really close to the Empire State Building when you look at the city, the main campus. But that's the iconic space. Right?
I was a little disappointed. I was like, where's the Empire State Building? I can't see it.
Look, like right up Fifth Avenue. You might.
Okay, so let's stick with Halima and let's talk about her segment, Right to Bear Alms, WRITE, to bear ALMS. Halima is a charitable giving expert. And there you have it. Get it? See what we're doing here? See what we're doing here? See what we're doing here? It just so happens, though, that I had spoken to Halima for an episode of a radio show that I host called The Way Forward on WBOK Radio. in New Orleans. And Halima had written a research article for the New Orleans Index at 20. That was a piece that the Data Center of New Orleans put together, and it was looking at New Orleans 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. Philanthropy was something that they had not really covered in any of their indices. And so they brought Halima on, and she came on the radio show to talk about it. And I thought it would be a really good idea to run that interview on this podcast as well because of the Right to Bear Arms segment. So here is Halima, episode 70 of For Our Edification, Philanthropic Investment in New Orleans. How do the parishes outside of Orleans, how does Orleans Parish, how do we position ourselves to attract philanthropic investment without, quote unquote, waiting for some kind of emergency?
I think really maintaining the relationships and the partnerships. We have done an exceptional job here of staying connected to our friends, our funders, our supporters, the people who see how special New Orleans is.
Everybody wants to come to New Orleans.
Everybody wants to have a conference in New Orleans. We've done an exceptional job of bringing them into the family, inviting them to the dinner table, inviting them to our conversations, and making them a part of who we are. I think continuing to do that, continuing to have conversations about the value that New Orleans has beyond New Orleans. We all, yes, you take care of home first, but recognizing that this is an exceptionally special place. The people here, somebody the other day who's a newcomer to the city said that New Orleans is magical. And I hear people say that often. And as a non-New Orleanian, as a person who has come to appreciate New Orleans as home, sharing that with other people. There's a reason why New Orleanians can go other places and be wildly successful, and contribute in some very meaningful ways. And we've seen that happen time and time and time again. So that's a part of attraction of philanthropy, giving people, showing people what they should be investing in, and maintaining those relationships.
And there you have it, episode 70 of For Our Edification. Halima talking about philanthropic investment in New Orleans 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. Now, let's stick with this theme also about doing a replay from the radio show, The Way Forward, because there was another interview that I thought would fit really, really well into For Our Edification. There is this sociologist, a social scientist, who is on Threads, and she talks about critical thinking and the importance of critical thinking, but then also how there's kind of a fight going on to make sure that people continue to use critical thinking, because I know that there are those of us who are educated who can't believe that critical thinking is actually in danger, but it is. And this social scientist, this sociologist, Dr. Esha Lovrić, had been on Threads doing all of these posts about the importance of critical thinking, what it is, even defining critical thinking. And as it turns out, the post that made me want to reach out to Esha was a post that she did about the difference between critical thinking and conspiratorial thinking. And so she joined me on The Way Forward, and I ran that interview back on For Our Edification for episode 69, The Fight for Critical Thinking. We had a big conversation in the U.S. Leading up to the presidential election about folks who, had all these conspiracy theories about one candidate versus another candidate, and people who tried to think critically about what was going on just got exhausted, in all of this. So in thinking about this, just so that people have the language and understand that there is a real thought process here, what is the difference between a critical thinker and a conspiracy theorist, or at least someone who engages in critical thinking versus someone who engages in conspiracy theories?
Critical thinking is curious, and conspiratorial thinking generally is suspicious. And this is probably a quite a distinct difference. And I think where it gets a little bit confusing and the lines can get a little bit blurred is because both start at kind of questioning the status quo and what you see is not what really is. And both start at kind of wanting to look underneath it or behind an issue or around it. And that's why it can kind of get a little bit blurred, because it's like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing, so I'm a critical thinker because I'm just digging deeper. And that's a great start. Of course you should do that, because what we see is not always what is. Now, while they might start at the same point, what's interesting is the gap between them kind of widen as they continue their research, in inverted commas, because the way that they're actually engaging in the information or the research that they're finding is kind of the distinction as well. So a critical thinker, if you're doing that ethically, you want to learn and you want to understand better. That's the whole point of engaging with information. You want to know more. And so as they explore, they should become excited about knowledge and learning diverse ways of thinking about a topic. It's intriguing. Knowledge is very intriguing. And how things come to be is very exciting to learn about. Then this process kind of pushes you in your critical thinking journey to branch out in other directions that you didn't even expect. And your original ideas sometimes are proven to be wrong. And in the end, it's an incredibly enlightening experience. I actually think that everyone who engages in any sort of learning in a healthy way, we realize how much of a joy, if you're doing it right, learning and obtaining knowledge can be. Whereas with conspiratorial thinking, I guess starting with that suspicion, you've already decided what is true. And as you start researching, those strong biases kind of dictate what information they become attracted to. So they end up reconfirming existing beliefs over and over again and just continue in a loop.
That's episode 69 with Dr. Esha Lovrić, The Fight for Critical Thinking. Now, as I mentioned, I really wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive into personal leadership for this season of For Our Edification. And there was this guy who I ran across also on social media named Chris Tidrick. And he did this cattle call one day when he wanted to hear from men who were working to develop themselves. And I raised my hand and I was honored that Chris invited me to his podcast called the Illuminate podcast, and Illuminate as in ILLUMENAT. And so I had a really good conversation with him then. I felt very comfortable talking to Chris. So he had to come. He had to come on For Our Edification. So I invited Christopher Tidrick to join me on episode 58 of For Our Edification to talk about his mantra, think, feel, lead. What are some of the aha moments that you have run across that you think are helping you become a better leader or a better person?
Two things. Growth is something that never stops. We should never be satisfied in our current state. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be content, but you should never be closed to growth, right? There are opportunities in life that, whether they are challenges for you, whether they're opportunities for you, they're going to be these moments where life presents you with a chance to grow. Like, I haven't hit any point in my life where I've taken one of those chances to grow and haven't become better and more satisfied and more whole. The other piece that I think, and this is something we dove into when you were on Illuminate, was growth requires deconstruction. And by that, I mean, there are things we are taught, there are things that we learn, there are things that we consider core to ourselves that sometimes to grow requires us to remove those things from our lives. or to repurpose them or put a new coat of paint on them or whatever it is, you can't stay the same at your core and grow at the same time. And on top of that, it's all really hard work.
That's Christopher Tidrick, episode 58 of For Our Edification, Thinking, Feeling, and Leading is that episode name. Now, there was another cat who I ran across on Threads. Okay, so there's a, there's a theme. Anyway, so there's this other cat I ran across on Threads, and his name is Rashad Young. Rashad is someone who really impresses me. At the time I spoke to him, I don't think Rashad had even made his 30th birthday. But Rashad is a lot like Chris, honestly. He really believes in being authentic. He believes that men should be more authentic. He believes that men should be more vulnerable. And he really is authentic on his podcast, which is called Knowing is Knowing. And so Rashad did the same thing. He did a cattle call asking folks if they would be interested in joining him and on his podcast. I was very honored, as I was with Chris. I was very honored to join Rashad on his podcast. Now, there's a story here. Before you listen to this clip, I have got to tell you, there's a story here. So Rashad schedules the interview. And the interview is on a Saturday. I'm thinking, based on the invitation that I got from Rashad, that this was a phone call to prepare for the podcast episode. So when Rashad and I joined each other on the virtual meeting, I was actually sitting in the back of my car because my wife was actually giving someone a ride. She was giving one of her coworkers a ride somewhere, and I was in the back of the car, and I said, I just have to take this phone call really quickly. I get on the call, and I put the phone up, and I'm looking into it, and Rashad goes, "All right, you ready to start the interview?" Bro, I'm in the back of this car, and he said, no, we can do it. Let's see what happens. And so we did the interview with me riding in the back of the car. I'm on Zoom on my phone, and that is how the interview happened. I had my earbuds in and all that other good stuff, and I was so embarrassed. But Rashad was a great sport. He said that the interview turned out great, and I believed him. So we're going to go with what he said. But when Rashad came on for Our Edification, I really wanted to talk to him about his authenticity and how he finds strength in being authentic and vulnerable, especially as a Black man, and especially as a Black man who practices mental health, because Rashad is a therapist. And so we had a great conversation on episode 59. It is Strength and Authenticity with Rashad Young. One of the things I hear from you as far as your personal leadership is concerned is that you find these ways to really work with vulnerability. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while, but yeah.
It takes a while for all of us, though. I mean, to me, the strongest people I've met are the ones who have really talked about what they're working on and how they're working on it. Some of the biggest knuckleheads that I've ever met are the people who really want you to think they've had it all figured out. I mean, I working in higher education, I've met a lot of people like that, and so
kind of goes back to the miseducation of the Negro.
Absolutely,
the more educated the Negro becomes, the more ignorant he becomes self.
Mm-hmm.
People do it all the time, man. People don't want to take it further. I mean, being vulnerable is very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to share any of your struggles to people. That's very easy to be judged by others. And some people are yet to accept the fact that we always will be judged by somebody. You just have to not care at some point because it's just their opinion or perception of what they think of you versus what they actually know.
And there we go. Rashad Young, episode 59, Strength and Authenticity on For Our Edification. All right, here's the final episode I'm going to take a look at. And before I talk about this final episode, Of course, you have to go back and check out all the episodes because I had some other great guests, but this other guest was someone who I met through the speaker lab. So I did the speaker lab. It was this speaker business training, and I saw some posts by this guy named Carlos Henry. Just like Rashad, it turns out Carlos is a young cat. I mean, he's in his 20s, but Carlos has this passion for leadership. And I wanted to talk to him about it to find out why exactly he is so passionate when it comes to leadership. And so episode 64 was with Carlos Henry, who has just the most interesting story to tell. I will give you this tidbit about my conversation with Carlos. This young man is someone who is doing well for himself. He is a speaker. He does well in the world of work. At one point, he divulged this during our conversation. At one point, when he was a kid, he lived in a house where the front door didn't lock and it was infested with roaches. This guy, Carlos, had every reason to give up or to just do whatever he wanted to do in life, however he wanted to do it, no matter who it hurt. But he didn't do that. Carlos went the other direction. And Carlos decided that for him, leadership is about being a winner. And so episode 64 is Winners Win with Carlos Henry. One of the things that I've learned, especially looking at leaders and what leaders have to deal with, is that resilience is a must. How much of a role does resilience play in your life? How do you see resilience playing a role in your life?
I feel like without resilience, having any type of resilience, I probably wouldn't even be here. You know what I mean? Because I'm talking about, like I said, when I was living with my dad's house, we had to figure out what our next meal was. I mean, I'm going to cousin's house. I'm waking up 5 o'clock in the morning, walking 30 plus minutes on a highway just to go wash some clothes and coming back and washing, you know what I mean? Because my dad wouldn't do it. I mean,
Wow.
without resilience, I wouldn't be half the person I am, but I felt like it helped develop me into the man that I am today is the fact that I even had that. So just besides developing me into that, it also kind of saved my life actually having and never being able to give up. Because if I really wanted to give up, I could have just been at home starving, whatever is going on, or homeless and just thinking, oh, this is it, not going to school and just being like another statistic. And because I know people that do different things too, activities that aren't particularly the most legal. So I could easily just done any of those things, but instead I just decided, no, I'm a what I mean, get myself together and just not be like that. And that's why I enjoy going back and speaking at schools that may have some kids that they may have some challenges, or going back and speak at programs. And some of the times when I do speak, it's free because I was like, yo, I just want to just for one, I'm gonna get some content, but I really just want, if I could just change one kid's life, like that's all it is for me, to be honest with you. It's impact over money, but I know the money will always follow.
And again, Carlos Henry, episode 64, Winners Win. So just really quickly, let me just give you just a quick idea of what's coming up in season 7. Season 7, when I get this thing started again, we're going to be re-upping with our 2 segments, Right to Bear Arms. There's going to be more of that, and Higher Edification. But I think what I'm going to do is, I know what I'm going to do in season 7. I'm going to do more uniform questions with my guests. Because I know myself, I'm kind of all over the place. Well, I mean, season 5, I did a couple of episodes where I talked about my ADHD. And so I'm going to make that a bit more uniform, but I'm also going to want to hear more from you. So I'm going to engage folks more on social media to get their feedback on episodes, because I would love to hear from you. Past episodes of For Our Edification are available at eddiefrancis.com or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, follow, and share your favorite episode of For Our Edification or the whole podcast. For Dr. Halima Francis, I'm Eddie Francis. Thank you so much for checking out season 6. That means you got to check out seasons 5 through 1, 2. But also, thank you for joining me on this episode of For Our Edification.